Okay, so a few people have asked about putting a relief tube in the aircraft, and my take on this is, what's the difference between that and just taking a porta-john on board? At least with a porta-john, as soon as you finish your flight, you can take it off and dump it somewhere. Hopefully in a bathroom. Don't just throw it out anywhere. But with a relief tube, it's going to have to be stored somewhere, and so that's basically on board. And you're in a pressurized cabin. It's literally has to stay inside the pressure vessel. And do you really want to have to deal with that and cleaning it and the smell and all that sort of stuff? It's just not realistic. Anyway, so that's the answer to that question. Hopefully no one ever asks that question again. Okay, so the next thing, what are my thoughts on an electric power plant someday? And I've had a lot of thought about this even from the first day that I started doing the design on this thing, which was over 4 years ago now. That the electric solution will probably be the way to go in the future as things progress and the battery technology gets there. Even right now, there's electric motors that we could put two together, driving through a single prop shaft, so no reduction drive or any of that stuff, just basically two electric motors driving through a shaft that has the prop bolted on the end of it. And you may or may not still have a governor on there, which again, that would be another problem that would need to be solved, but you could have a governor on there to change the pitch, so you can put a constant speed on there. But with the two motors that are available right now, I mean, you can have 600 horsepower available for takeoff. And you can take off electrically, which would be pretty silent. And again, you could land electrically, which would be pretty silent. But in terms of your range, you have to have some batteries on board, obviously, to run it. But for an aircraft, you generally want to go long trips, so you need some sort of range extender. The batteries, mainly would be, for your takeoff and climb, and then come in for landing, and also as a backup. But you generally still want to be using some sort of fuel, I think, to generate electricity. But the advantage of that is that you could switch over to like a purpose-built, like a linear generator that just had one throttle setting. It didn't have to have all of the different things that you have in a normal engine. The generator that would be attached to it or be integrated into it would be specifically designed to generate power at a certain level. And you could actually make those modular and have a bunch of them on board. So if you were going to do a longer flight, or you needed more power, you could just put another one on board and it would generate more power, so you could have more power for takeoff and we'll go faster in cruise or whatever. So I think that we're getting there. What's really stopping it right now is it really isn't a good linear generator or just purpose-built electricity generating engine available. Although there are some companies working on it for cars, as a range extender. So there is people working on that. And in terms of the battery technology, we're still not quite there in terms of the power density that we need, to make it really viable to put, batteries in, and the weight that's involved and things like that. But I think one of the great things about the Raptor design here is that you have such a wide fuselage, and there's, carries through to the back there. So in the engine compartment, there's all kinds of ways that we could reconfigure that with an electrical power plant, and battery and generators or whatever. So definitely that's something that I think is going to be there in the future. And if we have this is all dialed in with all the systems and the pressurization, we got all the flight controls all sorted out and all that sort of stuff, then we can start looking at that. Or once certain new batteries become available, whatever, then we can really start looking at it. Because I mean, I would love to have an electric option where you don't have to worry about oil leaks and things like that from your engine. Okay, so let's see the next thing. Do you have any plans for a twin engine version? No. How many parts do you expect to get from each mold? And generally the molds are, it depends on how well you treat them and how complex they are. If there's lots of tight corners and things like that, and the part may get trapped in there and need a little bit more work to actually extract it each time, then the mold is going to get damaged. And you can still repair the molds, but over time, depending on how well they're looked after, they will wear, and they may develop some sort of damage that is not repairable, and then you'd have to create another particular mold for that part. And this is why we've kept all the plugs too. So not only could we create a new mold, but we could also create another set of molds in order to increase the production capability of what the company can do. Because obviously, if one particular mold takes a day to lay up, then you're limited by how many aircraft that you can produce, because that particular mold is your bottleneck. And if you create another mold for that, then all of a sudden you've doubled your throughput. So that's kind of what we need to do. And obviously, most of the molds and that you can actually create parts, put them in an oven, and pop them out an hour or so later, and then lay up the next part if you really wanted to get production humming along. Okay, people have asked about lightning protection, and that's something that I've done a bunch of research on. And again, that's sort of like the heated leading edge type thing for the wings. I think it needs to be addressed, but just with the scope of what we have already on our plate for the prototype, we're not going to do anything. But I think for production aircraft, we could look at embedding the mesh in the skin and the wing skin like they've done in other aircraft. We wouldn't be inventing anything new. We'd just be using the same technique that other people have used. And my take on it is, and I might be completely wrong about this, if you put a big lightning rod out the back there where the engine is, that's more likely going to attract any sort of lightning strike than wanting it to hit your wing way out here and have it travel all the way along the wing, through to the engine block. I might be completely wrong on that, but it just seems like a good idea that if you had a lightning type rod, right attached to your engine, that's where it would attract a strike, and then it wouldn't cause as many problems, and it would just go right to the engine ground. But anyway, I'm probably wrong, and people will probably tell me in the comments, so that's fine. The next thing is, will you or the flight center handle initial flight training? It's again too early to go into details, but if you wanted to look at the models of other companies, like Lancair and Glossair and those sorts of other companies, and how Cirrus does it, we'll just basically be doing a similar type of model to what they're doing. It doesn't make sense to reinvent the wheel with something that's kind of proven like that. Okay, so the next thing, how are calculations of weight and balance? We're a little bit overweight right now, but there's a lot of things that have gone in here that, like for example, in the forward bulkhead, there's a bunch of hard points in there that we don't need anymore because we changed around a few things with how the foreplane is going to bolt up to that. So there's various different places where we can shed weight after the prototype's done, but it's pointless to try and take the weight out now. It's there, and fortunately for the amount of fuel that we can carry on board this thing, the prototype's still going to fly fine. We just won't be able to have the same total useful load as what the production aircraft would have. Let's see, and along with that question was, how is the performance numbers? Are they still on target? Well, with respect to the engine, and you kind of know the engine's over at the dyno shop right now, and the guys from Motec going to be arriving not this week but next week to do the tuning on that. And I'm actually hoping for, all the calculations that I did with the turbo and the two different turbos show that we should be able to get 375 horsepower out of that engine comfortably. And in fact, it's kind of set up for that because the wastegates on the turbo is what drives that, and they're set up for basically 14 psi, so it's like sea level type pressure. So with one pumping into the other, the way the math shows is that we should be able to get 375 horsepower and about almost 500 foot-pounds of torque. And with that sort of power, it's going to be more than what I originally had for this design, and what we've kind of spec'd with Mark with all the different calculations he's done, with max gross weight and things like that. So if provided that the engine provides that sort of power, I think everything's going to be good in terms of the performance of the aircraft. And the other advantage of this compound turbo setup is that we should be able to have that same power available all the way up to 25,000 feet. And obviously you're not going to be running your engine at 100% power at 25,000 feet, forever and ever. But it would be available there, to do a quick test run. And in fact, we're going to be limiting the engine to 3,800 RPM. And whereas this engine in the automotive variant there has a maximum RPM of 4,600. So we're already not allowing you to bring the engine up to anywhere near maximum RPM of this engine, so it's not going to be working all that hard anyway. And a lot of these diesel engines, or pretty much all diesel turbo engines, have a very flat torque curve, and the power and the torque is basically pretty much flat all the way along the curve there. So even if you're not getting up to the higher RPMs, you're still getting the same power and torque out of it as what you would at a higher RPM. Okay, so the next thing, let's see, I always like this question. Why are you tackling an experimental airframe and an experimental engine at the same time? Because it's fun, right? Seriously, I mean, if we were just going to put a Continental or a Lycoming engine in this thing, what have we really done? We've created an aircraft with a larger cabin, big deal. We haven't really done anything. The engine is so much a part of what this is. The fact that we're going to be able to go down and get recreational diesel for $2 a gallon or $1.99 a gallon and fly this thing, you know, even just, you know, flying around the area, it's probably going to only burn about 5 gallons an hour when we're just sort of cruising around here. So to be able to fly this thing for $10 an hour, whereas, you know, up at the airport here, avgas is I think it's $4.49 a gallon now, and probably, you know, because of the spike from the storms or whatever, but still $4.49 a gallon for that. And, you know, even in a Cessna 172, you know, you're burning 10 gallons an hour in that thing, doesn't matter what you're doing. So, you know, there's like $45 an hour just to run a Cessna 172 and $10 an hour. I mean, seriously, this is the reason that why I'm doing the engine. And if we were to do a Continental or Lycoming first, you'd get stuck in that rut and you'd never, you know, put the effort in to go and do a different engine. So yeah, and it's a big risk. But, you know, if it works out, then, you know, we've got an awesome solution. If it doesn't work out, you know, maybe you can fall back onto doing something more traditional. So anyway, that's the answer to that one. People have asked about the open house. Are we going to have an agenda or anything like that? No, it's just basically going to be the open house. We're going to have the aircraft here. You're going to be able to, you know, come and sit in it and feel what it's like, you know, feel the stick, throttle, all that sort of stuff, you know, for a limited amount of time, because we're going to have about 300 people here, you know, in a 6-hour period. So you just do the math on that, how much time that you're going to get to sit on board. And obviously you're going to spend a lot of time, you know, just chatting with all the other people that are here. And you'll be able to see, we're going to have the model out so you can see that. And, you know, we hopefully have some video of the engine running on the dyno showing the performance numbers. I'm just got my fingers crossed that those guys can pull that off before then. So that's kind of how that's going to be. And actually, with respect to the food, you all know that we've got this Smoke and Moe's barbecue coming. And I actually got to experience that on Saturday. They were down in town where I live down there, and there was a little sort of festival thing going on there, and they were there, and man, I think you guys are in for a bit of a treat. It was a really good barbecue. So if anything, you're going to get a good feed when you get here, so that's good. Anyway, so next thing, have you considered running some of the cooling lines through the floor to keep the cabin warm from below? Basically, I mean, putting radiant heating in the floor, I think it's totally overkill. As I said before, you know, the whole fuselage has a 1/2-inch core in it, foam core, which basically is insulation. And, you know, obviously with a, you know, carbon fiber on both sides, it's going to be very well insulated. And because it's pressurized, there's going to be no sort of, you know, cold air leaks going in and out. So it should, once it warms up from, you know, the heat from the turbo and or the heat, you know, coming off the engine, you know, through the traditional method, through the heater thing, it should be plenty warm. And yeah, heated seats, you know, would be nice, but so would a lot of things. You know, right now, that's obviously we're not going to do heated seats in the prototype. It's just overkill. Somebody had asked about whether the pressurization can be set for lower than 8,000 feet, an 8,000 foot cabin. Well, basically how it works, and we'll just see if I can get all this math right in my head here. We limit the aircraft to having an 8,000 foot cabin feel when you're at 25,000 feet. So that is done by pressurizing the cabin to 5.5 psi. If you want to come and set it down so it's only 5,000 feet, it means that you have to pressurize the cabin quite a lot more, which means everything has to be bulked up in terms of the structure to handle it. So no, you can't really do that. And, you know, you could fly at a lower altitude, but the pressurization is still going to be set up to only like keep the cabin, you know, at 8,000 feet and no higher in terms of pressurization. So, and you know, most people do fine at 8,000 feet. That's what all the airliners fly at. So I think you'll be fine. And then last question here is, will you have an option for emergency oxygen in the production kit? You can actually go and buy emergency oxygen bottles for about $300 as the whole setup, and you can have it on board. We're not going to integrate anything in there because it's just something that needs to be maintained. It needs to be refilled and all the hassles and stuff for it, just for emergency backup. You're better off having a removable one that you can just bring in there when you need it, and you know, take it off to where it needs to be maintained and not have to take your aircraft somewhere to where it needs to be maintained. And legally speaking, if you fly 25,000 feet or below, and in a pressurized aircraft, you don't need to have a backup oxygen system. The thinking is that you're flying along in an 8,000 foot cabin. You're going to be wearing a pulse oximeter on your finger anyway, so just personally yourself that you're getting plenty of oxygen in your system. And obviously those things, I believe they come with an alarm as well. So, but you're going to be just be in the habit of checking, oh look, I'm 98% where I need to be, or whatever. And if for some reason that you lose pressurization, if it's a slow process, then you just realize, oh, okay, we're losing pressurization. Obviously, let's just descend. Not a big deal. If the pressurization just cabin breaks or whatever, something like that, and you lose pressure instantly, which is more likely to happen, then what you would do is basically just pull the power back on the engine, and you don't have to worry about shock cooling in this engine because it's water cooled. So you pull the power back, you'd flatten out the prop, which will slow you down dramatically. You can drop the gear, which will create a lot more drag, and you can just point the nose down, and it'll come down at 3,000 feet a minute without any problems at all. So from 25,000 feet in 3 minutes, you're going to be down 9,000 feet. So you're going to be down at 16,000 feet, which is quite breathable air. Anybody who's ever been up to Colorado, you can go to the mountains there and then 14,000 feet. So within 3 minutes, you can be down, and that's plenty of time. For you, starting out with plenty of oxygen in your system, you're not going to have a problem. And that's why the rules basically say you don't need it. So anyway, that's the answer to that one. Let's see if there's anything else I can think about. So when you come to the open house, please, keep in mind that this is a work in progress. There's all kinds of different things. We've got little nicks and things like that on different parts. Please don't be picking on all that sort of stuff. We don't have time to fix little things like that. That's the sort of things that you'll fix later on, when you go over the whole thing, to get it ready for paint. So it is a work in progress. There's all kinds of things, that still need to be done. Nothing would be more annoying than having, I would have done it this way, or I would have done it that way, or you should do this, or you should do that. Just come along, enjoy, seeing the aircraft in person, get to sit in it, for 3 or 4 minutes, and then let the next person, take a seat in it, and so that everybody can get a chance to experience it. So anyway, until I have a different or another set of questions, and that hopefully this answers most of the questions that people have had on their minds. And again, as I said, the goal right now is to get the prototype flying, make it as good as we can, and then figure out exactly what the best way is to scale up the business. And again, sort of in terms of what I had said before about partnering with different companies and things like that, the biggest problem that I have right now is finding skilled people that can come and work here. And I can't imagine trying to build a company in the space of 3 months or 6 months or whatever, where you try and bring on 100 or 200 people to scale up to the sort of business like you have, at Moody or Cirrus or whatever. I just can't imagine doing it. I don't have the background or skills to do it. I can probably, bring on some management who may know how to do it, and that's probably what's going to end up happening. Even, just to scale up the business, so we have, the facility that can actually put all the parts together, because that's pretty much, I think, what's going to be the core component of what Raptor will do, is they'll be putting all the parts together. So, if there's another company overseas possibly, producing all the carbon fiber parts, if they have all the molds and tooling over there, and they ship all that to us like Landseer did, and then we have, other companies who are, building the various different subcomponents of the engine, like setting up the turbos and doing the reduction drive system, and then we have somebody who's building our panels for us or whatever. Initially, I think the way to do it is basically have all these different companies doing stuff for us, and then we put it all together. And so then we can grow the company up with a number of people who are skilled at actually, bonding all the components together. Then we don't need to have a whole bunch of jigs and stuff. We just have, one set of jigs, or a couple of different jigs, so we can quickly go through, put fuselages together and things like that. And so you still have to scale up a company. And again, I don't have any experience in doing it, and I'm certainly not going to be the person who's making all those decisions. Once the prototype is flying, we're probably going to take a large investment from one or more companies who are interested in what we're doing and want to see it successful. And then along with that is going to get some sort of management team, kind of like you would do in a normal traditional venture capital fund, where you get a bunch of money, but at the same time you get a team of people that know what they're doing, and they'll be able to advise and say, okay, this is how we need to do it, and these are the key players we need to get, in order to, somebody who's going to be the CEO and run the company or whatever. And so, I'm quite happy to step back and let the people who've done that before, do it the way that they know how to do it. I'm not sort of going to be like one of these people like, oh, I need to run the whole show. I don't want to do that, because to me, we've come a long way with this, and I don't want to mess it up by being the one who makes a bad decision when it comes time to scaling up, purely because I don't know what I'm doing. Right now I still don't know what I'm doing, really. I mean, Jeff's the one who knows how to build all this stuff. Mark's the one who knows how to do all this structural analysis. And then I'm leaning on all these other different people, who know everything about, the various different systems that we're doing. And really all I'm doing is basically being a cheerleader right now and just trying to get all this thing to happen, in a reasonable amount of time. So, and that'll be kind of what I'll end up doing, once we scale up to production, and just finding the right team or the right people who know what they're doing to be able to scale it up. Because nothing would be worse than, if we just go and we try and get a larger facility and try and hire 1 or 2 people a week. It would take years before we come up to this type of level that needs to be here to build, a reasonable amount of aircraft every year. And if we're only building 10 aircraft a year, then have we really changed anything? Not really. You just got 10 people who are experiencing all your hard work. So to me, that's not success. Success would be, I think, in about 3 or 4 years, being able to produce sort of 100 to 200 aircraft a year. I think that's possible with the right people and enough funding behind the project. So that's kind of I think what needs to be the goal. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this Q&A, and thanks again for watching and supporting all the video updates, and we'll see you on the next update. Cheers.